Good afternoon, fellow philosophers. Welcome to a video, my first video actually. In today's video, you see the title, it's going to be Why I'm Not an Atheist. Why I'm no longer an atheist, rather. Before we start the video, though, I wanted to, since this is my first video on this channel, I wanted to start off with a quick intro and a background for some people who may or may not know me. So, I'm Jaden, and I grew up in a Christian household practically my whole life. Mother and father both in the home. My mother was more of the religious person in the household. My father didn't really follow until later into my life, here recently, for the most part. I would say growing up in a Christian household, especially a strong Christian household, to where it was like basically the foundation of our home. I think as a child I rebelled against that a lot. Not just because normal child rebellion or anything. Like, of course that played a part in it, but a lot of it also had to do with me thinking that the idea of a creator, and specifically Christianity, didn't make sense at all. To me, it was absurd to believe in something like that. I had these conceptions. Oh, well, God's a genocidal maniac. He's selfish. He doesn't care about anyone. Like, how could he let all this bad stuff happen? A lot of common objections that I later found out were wrong, but we'll get to that later. A lot of common objections I had that made it a struggle for me to believe in this idea of a creator. And I think that tension in my home and between me and my mom, that happened for a while. I'd probably say I called myself an atheist probably around 11 or 12 years old. When I was pretty young, I had a fairly good idea of the fact that I didn't believe in this idea. Like I said, to me it was absurd, to say the least. So yeah, there's a lot of tension between me and my mother, and I don't think I ever gave the idea too much thought after for a while after that. I didn't give the idea any thought again until probably I was about 16, and I guess what changed when I was 16 is I found it quite absurd to say that there is no God, because it's a claim of knowledge, and in order to make a claim to knowledge, then you have to be able to back up your claim and have evidence for your claim. And unfortunately, no one has proved, or there's not even no one's proved that there is no God. You can't. It's not possible to prove there is or isn't a God. It's quite frankly impossible. I'd say around 16, I started beginning to question things. I'd probably consider myself more of an agnostic at that point, just because I figured, oh, well, I'm making a claim to knowledge, and I can't do that if I want to be, intellectually honest. And it's probably about the age when I began to explore different ideas and different ideologies of the world. I didn't go into too much depth at that age. I really have here a lot more lately in my life. Most of it was mostly just looking into science and stuff like that kind of made me agnostic, because of the fact that you begin to look at the universe and observe reality around you. You begin to get this. I would say most people begin to get this idea that everything is extremely intricate and complex, and the way everything works together like an intricate system, and everything is intermingled and meshed together is it's insane. So while observing this, I kind of came to the idea, well, man, like it's kind of insane that everything's just as perfect as it needs to be. Like for example, this is what's known as the teleological argument, the argument from design. It's the argument of God's existence. So simple things like the fact that the Earth is the third planet in the solar system, and if it was a tad bit further away or a tad bit closer to the sun, life couldn't exist. Or the fact that so far that life only exists on Earth, as far as we know. Or you could talk about the constants of the universe, like the strong and weak nuclear force and the gravitational constant, I believe, which are, for you that don't know, these are laws of physics that hold the universe literally together. They hold the universe together, and if these laws were changed by the slightest decimal point, then reality in and of itself would collapse. So when I started to look into things like that and ideas like that, I really started to question my atheism, because in my head, I thought that, if it's true, there's no creator, and then everything is just randomness, and we're just here just to be here, just off a lucky spin, a lucky roll of the dice, then it doesn't really make sense for everything to be ordered and designed. If we're here off a lucky spin of the dice, you'd expect everything to be chaos and random. But you don't see that in the universe at all. That you don't observe that at all. Now, sure, you could say that's a subjective opinion that that the universe is designed or has order or things like that. But I think I think anyone with a brain would agree with the statement that everything is quite intricate and complex. And the question then becomes is, how do you get complexity and intricacy out of randomness? It doesn't logically follow, right? It doesn't make sense at all. If you started with something random, then you would expect the result to be something random. If you started with something chaotic, then the result should be chaotic. But here in the result in the universe, we see order and design. So you would expect above it to be an orderer or a designer. That would make sense. So it's known as the teleological argument. Although I didn't know that at the time when I was 16, I ended up discovering it later. I just thought, I thought that it made sense. Like, man, everything's designed. It's quite a coincidence. But I ended up finding out later it's an actual argument for the existence of God. And so I started to explore. Now, since I grew up in a Christian household, like I just mentioned to you guys, I decided that if I was going to explore any religion, it wasn't going to be Christianity first. So I explored a few other religions before I even went into Christianity, because I figured, well, that's what I grew up with, and what are the chances that what I grew up with could be correct or could be right? There's a whole world out there. There's so many other religions. Surely someone has the right idea. So I began to study other religions like Islam and Hinduism. I have the Quran right here. This is the Quran. It's got the English and Arabic in it. If you guys can see, this is the Arabic right here, and it's got the English. And then we got Hadith from the Quran. This is Sahih al-Bukhari. It's the sayings of the Prophet. We'll get into that later. It's not really important now. And I have some Hindu text over here, and obviously the Bible. And so I began to study, and some mythologies as well, because those are also really important. But as I begin to study other mythologies and other religions, I kind of took it like a process of elimination, right? I figured if there is a God, right, and all these religions claim that they know this God, and they all have differing or contradicting ideas on who this God is, then they all can't be right. That doesn't make sense, because A and B cannot be true at the same time, right? So only either A or B can be true. So I figured, well, I'll just read everything and I'll do a process of elimination. And if it doesn't have any evidence for it, if it if it doesn't correlate to reality, then I'll throw the idea out the window. I'll go on to the next. So that was kind of the process I took along this journey. Let's see here. So I'm here to share my experience with you guys and let you know the conclusion I came to after all this research and why I'm no longer an atheist. And I guess one of the first arguments I can make for why atheism didn't explain the world to me was the objective morality argument. And if you don't know, which many of you probably don't, the objective morality argument is basically, it's the argument that objective morality can only exist if there's a moral lawgiver in order to make them objective. And since objective morals do exist, therefore that objective lawgiver, or God in this scenario, does exist. Now, what do you mean by that, Jaden? Okay, I'll give you an example. Now, if I were to kill your mother, or if someone were to rape your mother, right, you would believe that what that person did is objectively wrong, right? You would say that it's wrong to rape, it's wrong to kill. And I would agree with you. And I think everyone else on earth would probably agree with you as well. Of course, there's exceptions. But if we're going to say that's objectively wrong, we have to have some type of foundation in order to justify why is that belief wrong and or right. So if you don't have that foundation, then morality just becomes subjective, and we enter into this like nihilistic worldview, to where if you live out, a worldview to where morality is subjective, it doesn't quite seem to line up with reality, at least to me. So, for example, let's go back to the same example. Let's say someone rapes your mother, and you go, well, you know what? That's not really wrong. It's just a matter of opinion. It's just subjectively wrong. I think rape is wrong, but that person thinks rape is right. So our morality is different, and that's okay. And you could say that, but I don't think anyone actually believes that at all. I don't think anyone believes that. To truly live out a worldview to where morality is subjective, you have to understand that every viewpoint you hold has no foundation at all, and it has no meaning. It's just your opinion. Whether it be about murder, rape, abortion, any political view you have, it has no meaning at all. It's just subjective. Now, if you want to go back and say, you know what, Jaden, I do believe that murder is objectively wrong. I do believe that rape is objectively wrong. I'm going to then ask you, well, how do you know it's wrong? And it's going to be hard for you to come up with an answer if you're an atheist. It's going to be really hard. It's actually impossible for you to come up with an answer if you're an atheist. There is no objective morality in an atheistic worldview. You can't justify morality at all. There's no foundation for it. And to me, that does not correlate with reality. When I see someone raped or I see someone murdered, I think that's objectively wrong. Now, here's a good counter argument that the atheist might make. It could be the case that morality is just subjective, right? It could be the case that, rape is subjectively wrong and murder is subjectively wrong. That could be the case. I don't think it is. Because we all have this intuition. We all have this... what's a better way to put it? I guess intuition is a good way to put it. We all have this intuition that, I like the way Stephen Meyer puts it, that kicking old ladies in the shin is wrong. It doesn't matter who you are. If I told you, go kick that old lady in the shin, you'd be like, no, I'm not going to do that. That's wrong. If I ask you why that's wrong, it's a lot harder time to answer that. So that's the objective morality argument. How do we justify our morality? How do we if we believe morality exists and things are objectively wrong and right, and we want to live that out, then we have to have some way to justify that. And a God who imposes objective moral laws, like, for example, like the Ten Commandments in the Bible, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not commit adultery, don't covet what your neighbor has, things like that. If you have an outside force or an outside personal being or something above us as humans, it needs to be something above us in order to make it objectively true. A God would make a lot of sense in that scenario. It'd make a lot of sense, because if you have a God saying, well, you know what, well, rape is wrong, then rape is objectively wrong, because you have this all-powerful, this all-knowing being who literally, when he speaks, creates reality. So if he speaks and says murder is wrong, it's therefore wrong. And that's how we justify objective morality. Now, as an atheist, when I was an atheist, I had a hard time buying into that morality was subjective, because that just doesn't make sense to me, and I can't live that worldview out. It's impossible. It's kind of what you're seeing happening in the Western world right now with secularism on the rise. As you see people coming to this idea, well, morality is just subjective. It's what you think, it's what I think, and I don't buy into that. So, moving on from the objective morality argument, I'll go a little bit more into the teleological argument, I guess. Although we already touched on that a tad bit. The teleological argument is basically that the universe is composed in such a way that it appears to be designed and it appears to be ordered. And we know as humans that the only way that you get design and order is through a rational mind, or through a thinking or a thinking being. So, for example, human language, English, Spanish, Japanese, whatever you want to call it. This language is very, complex and intricate and designed, but we understand that language is composed from humans, and that intricate and complex thing, it wouldn't exist without humans in order to create it. The same thing with a TV, a car, or a house, anything. If you were to see any of those things, just walking down the street, you saw a car or a house or a TV, you would say, wow, look at how intricately designed that is. It must have came from nowhere. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't follow at all. When you see intricacy and complexity in design, 10 times out of 10 in human experience, it comes from a designer. I haven't seen anything that's complex and intricate that wasn't designed. Order doesn't come from chaos. It doesn't. And the atheistic worldview is just that order comes from chaos. And that doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense at all. How does that follow? It's illogical. That order was to come from chaos. And then we went over a lot of other things about the design of the universe. But it's very simple. We don't have to go into too many details about all these different parts of the universe that are designed. But that's a very simple way, the teleological argument. Things are designed. The universe is complex and intricate. Therefore, it must have a designer. So that these were two arguments that really started to make me shift my ideas from atheism to Christianity. Now, Christianity is obviously a jump because you'd say, well, how do you know that the Christian God is the right God? And I'm about to get into that. It's my next argument is exploring other religions. All right, so after arguments like the objective morality argument and the teleological argument, I came pretty convinced that there may be a God. And I wasn't quite sure that, there's a God most definitely, but I came pretty convinced that there may be a God. And like I said earlier, if there may be a God, then you have to figure out which one is the correct one. So, exploring other religions. I think this is one thing that will really help people narrow down, who's the true God. So, exploring Islam. I explored Hinduism, Mormonism, even though some people consider that Christianity, it's not. But explored Mormonism and other ideologies like that. And I found that they didn't really have a good case for being true. They didn't really correlate with reality, not as much as this book, not as much as the Bible. They didn't really correlate with reality at all. I'll eventually do more podcasts diving deeper into some of those topics and deeper. We'll do a podcast on Islam and we'll do a couple podcasts on Hinduism and such. But exploring other religions also, it kind of led me to Christianity. Because once I figured out that, okay, well, these other ones most definitely don't make sense, well, I have to go back to what I know, what I was raised up in. I have to go back to reading the Bible and exploring Christianity. And through that process, I eventually ended up discovering that the Christian God is the true God and the only God and the creator of the universe. You may ask, well, Jaden, how do you know that? How do you know that the Christian God is true? How do you know that the Christian God is the creator of the universe? And I apologize, this video is going to be, it's not going to be like in extreme detail. This is more like an introduction video to my channel. We're going to explore a lot more of these topics like in detail. I'm just trying to give an overview of what the channel is going to be about. But you may ask, well, Jaden, how did you discover that the Christian God is the true God? Well, through reading some philosophy and a lot of, theology books and things like that, we need to figure out, well, what is truth? And I think the best idea and theory for what truth is the correlation theory. Is truth is that which correlates with reality. So if I want to know what religion is true, then I need to figure out, well, which one correlates with reality? Which one matches up with what I experience and what I see in my everyday life? And that's how you'll figure out, well, is this one true or is it not? So, the evidence for Christianity. There's a lot of historical and a lot of archaeological evidence for Christianity that I could do millions of videos on. It's insane. A lot of people have this preconception that it's just a book and there's no evidence for it, and it's just not true. It's not true at all. A really good book and a good author as well is Titus Kennedy, and this book is Excavating the Evidence for Jesus. Now, Titus Kennedy, he's an archaeologist. He's an archaeologist over in like the Middle East, and like the biblical land is what we call it, in Bible land. And he digs up a lot of really interesting stuff, and there's so much archaeological evidence for Christianity being true. I could sit here and spend hours about the things that we've dug up. Of 25,000 manuscripts of the Bible, from 50, 60 AD all the way till 1,000 years later, 1,500 years later. We still have Bible manuscripts from then, before the printing press was made. They were writing on papyrus. The Bible is the most written. It's the most written about. It's the most written. What's the best way to put this? It's the most written book in history. There's more manuscripts of the Bible than there's in any other book in history. I could talk about Aristotle. I could talk about Plato. I could talk about Homer. I have Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey. And how many copies do we have of the Iliad and the Odyssey in Homer's original work? Not that many. I think it's like 100 or something, maybe 200, like 100 or 200 manuscripts, maybe less. We have 25,000 for this book. 25,000 manuscripts over 1,500 years of people writing down on papyrus. And that doesn't even include the Old Testament. That's just what we found in the New Testament. It's just what we found. There's no telling what else is out there. People writing down what they saw, eyewitness testimony. A lot of people have this conception that it's just a book of fairy tales. But that's not true. These people actually lived. We know they lived. When it talks about King David and King Solomon, those people actually existed. We found stone tablets, the Teldan Stele and the Merneptah Stele, 2 stone tablets that we found that mention King David, that date back to thousands of years ago. They're old tablets. Like I said, I could go into more detail about things we found, but just one thing that brought me to Christianity was the historical and archaeological evidence for it. There's more evidence for Christianity than just about any other thing in the world. I genuinely think that's true, and that's the case. A lot of people are just going to be blind to the idea because they have this preconception that if anything happens that violates their experience of reality, then it therefore must not be true, and that's not the case. So, for example, a lot of people read the Bible and they say, "Oh, Noah's Ark doesn't make sense. How did it rain for 40 days and 40 nights?" Well, if there's an all-powerful being who does exist, if we presuppose that this being exists, that there's an all-powerful being, is it really out of his power to make it rain for 40 days and 40 nights? So if what's keeping you from religion or Christianity is the idea of the supernatural and the idea of things that contradict nature, I would ask you to think about this for a second. Just like I said, presuppose that an all-powerful being exists. Would it really be hard for some of these claims that are in the Bible or any other religious book, the Quran, the Upanishads, or the Bhagavad Gita? Would it really be difficult for those things to have taken place if there is indeed an all-powerful being? The answer is no. No, it's not. It's not out of the question at all. So then you just need to figure out, well, does this all-powerful being exist, and how do I know? And by reading that book, man. Reading that Bible, man. There's so much evidence for it. I could talk about the evidence for Jesus, the fact that we know that Jesus was a real person who existed. The vast majority of ancient historians agree about 3 things about Jesus, and that's the fact that he was crucified, he lived, and he was a teacher, and he had disciples, and his disciples found his tomb empty, and they genuinely thought that that he rose from the dead. I didn't say that he did rose from the dead. They believed he rose from the dead. That's what the 3 main things that vast majority of ancient historians agree on. So, then what you just have to ask yourself is, well, what's the best explanation of those 3 points of evidence, right? So when we do science, we have pieces of evidence. We don't have the whole picture. We have pieces of evidence or pieces of knowledge, and we take those and we come up with the best explanation of the evidence that we have. In order, we use inductive reasoning to come up with the best explanation of the evidence we have in order to make a theory on what's true. And that's kind of that's how you figure out if anything's true. You don't base your life off of 100% 2 + 2 = 4 proof. You basically only find proof in mathematics. Outside of that, there's not really such thing as proof. But when you figure out those three things, well, his tomb was found empty. He was really crucified, and people actually wrote about him. When you read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the Gospels, those are eyewitness accounts of people who actually wrote about Jesus and wrote about his life and death and resurrection. So it's like, well, what's the best explanation of those events? Well, were they lying? Could have they been lying? Well, I guess you could say that they've been lying, except for the fact that 11 out of the 12 disciples were all killed for their beliefs. Well, I won't even say that. They weren't killed for their beliefs. They were killed for what they had claimed to seen. These people held their views and their ideas until death. Paul was beheaded. I think Matthew was stabbed by a spear in Ethiopia. Peter was crucified on an upside down, or no. Oh yeah, it was an upside down cross, or maybe an X-shaped cross. I remember, I can't remember. A lot of the disciples' deaths are really similar. But 11 out of 12 of Jesus' disciples, they all died. And they were, executed for what they had claimed to believe. I mean, Christians were persecuted in early Rome. So, I mean, you kind of have to ask yourself, well, how did Christianity get off the ground? Right? Like, how did a religion like that get off the ground, right? If they actually killed Jesus, right? If they actually killed your Messiah, threw out his body in front of you, you really think these people would have continued to worship him and be like, oh, man, that's our Messiah? Nah, bro. If there was someone that you believed in and that you thought they were God, and then you just saw them killed and just ragdolled out in front of you, you'd be like, nah, he wasn't God. He's just another human being. So how do you explain early Christianity getting off the ground? Well, it makes a lot of sense because Jesus' tomb was found empty. They never found his body. So the question is, well, what happened to his body? No one knows, no one. Well, I mean, obviously the Bible knows. The Bible gives a good explanation, but you can't. There's not really another explanation that's been given other than the one that's in the Gospels. If you tell me, well, he was crucified, and, his tomb was found empty, and all of his disciples died for what they claimed to believe, I think the best explanation for that evidence is the one given in the Gospels, the fact that Jesus was actually the Son of God and rose from the dead. That makes sense. That would make sense why Christianity got off the ground and why his tomb was found empty. And that would make sense as to why the disciples actually believed that he rose from the dead and why they wrote this down. So it's just a tad bit of historical evidence right there. But we're getting to a little bit longer of a video. We're at like 30 minutes. So, wow. I guess I'll say thank you. I really want to go into we're going into more specifics of these topics in later videos. I'll do a separate video about the historical evidence for Jesus and the archaeological evidence for Jesus, and we'll do a video on the Quran and Islam and Hinduism, and then we'll also do an argument on the different arguments, philosophical arguments for God, like the objective morality argument or the teleological argument. And there's a few other arguments too, some that I'm not really a fan of, but those are my favorite ones and the ones I think actually hold weight. There's a few that are pretty terrible, but yeah, with that being said, man, I want to thank you guys for coming to the video. If you made it all the way through watching the video, I appreciate it, for listening to me talk. I plan on doing a weekly podcast, and I really love to have people on, questioning, to debate, to just even challenge my views, or I can challenge your views, man, and to seek truth, to find out what truth is. So man, I appreciate y'all for watching, man. I hope y'all have a good one. Stay safe.